Welcome, friends. After a bit of a summer off, we are back with a fantastic guest. Before I go into introductions, I wanted to share some incredible news. Those that have listened for the last few years know I have been working on a thriller set in the ETF industry, and I landed an agent and sold it to a major publisher last year. It was a dream come true. It is now available for pre-order. If you like emotion-forward thrillers grounded in high finance with lots of interesting characters and twists, this one might be for you. Before I started my journey, I didn't know how much pre-orders meant to getting the book into bookstores. So jump on into your favorite book site and give The Lies We Trade a pre-order. You can also head to my website, christinedelano.com, for the links, or they'll also be in the show notes, wherever you're listening. If you do pre-order, send me a DM on LinkedIn or Instagram. I'd love to thank you. Welcome to the We Talk Careers podcast, brought to you by Women in ETFs. This is Christine Delano, and I'm thrilled you've joined us. If you're pursuing excellence in your own career or intrigued by the hustle required to make it to the top, this podcast is for you. This is season 6, and we are dropping in on leaders across the globe. We're going to learn how to balance, how to speak truth to power, and how to have fun doing it. So put aside that massive to-do list and let's get inspired. Today, our guest is Garrett Glawe. He is the head of Asset Owner ETF Specialists at Invesco. In this role, he leads a team to promote Invesco's ETF capabilities to U.S. asset owners and investment consultants. Prior to joining the firm, he spent 8 years in S&P Dow Jones Indices. Garrett holds an MBA from DePaul University and a BS in Finance and an MIS from Miami University. He is a CFA charter holder and serves as the co-head of the Chicago chapter of Women in ETFs. Garrett is a single dad with 2 amazing girls, aged 7 and 10. He loves time outside, including biking, running, hiking, boating, skiing, and the occasional round of mediocre golf, as he puts it. He recently worked with his family to raise money to build a school in Guatemala. Welcome, Garrett Glawe, to the We Talk Careers podcast. It is so good to have you.
Thanks for having me, Christine.
So I am excited to dig into this, as our listeners will be able to tell both by your name and your voice that perhaps it is not real women, real stories for this episode. So tell me, Garrett, a little bit about why you're willing to kind of come on the episode and share a bit of your story today.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think part of it has to do with the fact that I'm a dad to 2 amazing girls who are 7 and 10. And I just want to make sure that they have all the opportunity in the world. So I've been in the financial services industry back to 2008, and promoting diversity across all aspects has always been a very important part of what I believe in. I just think diversity leads to better outcomes for clients, whether you're talking gender diversity or ethnic diversity, diversity of background and thought. I've been involved with Women in ETF Chicago now for a couple of years. I'm actually the co-head of the Chicago chapter. And so helping the organization to put together networking events, educational events, and really connecting different parts of my network to advance gender diversity in our industry, which I think is really important and lacking, unfortunately.
Right. Well, I love your motivations. 2 young girls thinking about this world for them. That is fantastic. So tell me, as co-head of Chicago, what's happening in Chicago? Like what kind of events do you have coming? What do you see as the way to grow and enrich the experience for your members?
Yes, so I was involved prior to getting involved with Women in ETFs. I was on the board of CFA Society Chicago for 5 years. I held all the executive leadership roles, including being chair. And so part of what I've tried to bring to women in ETFs is this just network and this knowledge of other partner organizations that I think are aligned in interest and values. So we did a active ETF event with CFA Society Chicago earlier this year. So it was an opportunity to bring together these 2 incredible networks. Morningstar was kind enough to host that for us. And then in the middle of the year, we did an event with the Greenwood Project. So Greenwood Project is an amazing organization that is focused on Black and Latino high schoolers and trying to get them more involved in the financial services industry. training them in a variety of ways, showing them different career paths, and ultimately getting them summer internships with financial service companies. So they did their annual conference called Ascend just a couple months ago. And I got to know them through CFA Society Chicago, and asked if a Women in ETFs person would want to speak on their Women in Wall Street panel, which is one of the big sort of marquee parts of their conference. And so I invited April Reppy, who's someone that's been involved with Women in ETFs for a very long time, to speak at that conference. And so that's the types of things we've been trying to do this year is different networking and educational events that are bringing together different organizations that are also promoting diversity in our industry.
Thank you for that. So for a lot of us, diversity in this industry, even all the way down to sort of the teams and the people that we get to work with, it sounds obvious that we should all be sort of working toward this. But tell us why you think it's important and how you've seen it sort of play out in your career and why it has become such a passion for you.
Yeah. So, I mean, when I first started getting involved with CFA Society Chicago, so it's an organization that it's the oldest investment analyst society in the world. It's celebrating its 100-year anniversary this year, 5,000 members here in Chicago. And I was pretty shocked to find out that only 14% of the members of CFA Chicago are female. And then when you look at other stats of diversity, I mean, we don't even have great data, but the diversity stats, there's just a lot of people that look like me that are part of CFA Chicago and part of our industry. And so when I was at S&P Dow Jones Indices, so my role prior to being at Invesco, which is where I am now, I really had a chance to build out a global team. And so I had someone working for me in Mexico City. I had a Chinese woman working for me in Boston. I had an African woman working for me in London. And I just saw that diverse perspectives lead to better outcomes, right? If you give me a problem, I'm going to come at it from my perspective and, you know, the way that I was taught and my experiences that I've had in my life. And so I think the more you can have a diverse set of opinions and backgrounds and ways of approaching problems, the better outcome that you're going to come to, regardless of what you're trying to solve. And so that was really my first chance to lead a global team and to really bring in diverse perspectives and seeing how effective that was and how much like positive energy that generated across the team. And then so when I came to Invesco and had a chance to sort of build out our institutional ETF team, diversity is something that I'm continuing to really focus on as I have the opportunity to hire new people on my team. And yeah, it's something that I'll continue to focus on.
And how do you assure that you've got the opportunity to bring in diversity? It can't be something that, you know, someone's like, oh, I want this, but how is it that you've kind of created this pipeline or created the opportunity to, you know, to see maybe a diverse, you know, pool of candidates? The desire versus the execution, sometimes there's quite a gap.
Yeah, for sure. And I think you have to be very intentional about it in our industry. And so when I'm working with recruiters that are working on different roles that I've hired for, whether it's at Invesco or in past roles, I've just told them right up front that this is important to me, right? At the end of the day, I want the best candidate on my team. I want the person that can do the job most effectively, but I want the pool to be as diverse as possible. And so that's going to require additional work and effort on the part of the recruiter. It might require me to tap into my own personal network in some cases and actually offer up people. It might, you know, be things like, you know, use the Women in ETFs career board, use, you know, pull from different pools or even different schools than maybe we traditionally have. And so I think developing that good partnership with the recruiter who's working on a particular role can be very helpful. And then also just making connections at the sort of corporate level, right? Invesco is a sponsor for Women in ETFs, so it has been supporting Women in ETFs for a long time. So it's a logical connection point, right? Or the CFA Society job board, things like that. Just being very intentional in saying that I want at least the candidate pool to be very diverse and make sure that there's diverse candidates that are part of the interview process.
Right. When we started Women in ETFs podcast, this We Talk Careers, most of our audience was people within ETFs, and most were within the idea of diversity, things like that. It was very commonplace in the way that we think. what's been really gratifying over the course of this podcast is now we've got listeners from all walks of life that are looking for sort of leadership and really trying to understand sort of the nuanced components of being promoted, work-life balance, pieces of just basically being successful in the businesses that they're in. Help us make the case here. Is there any story? Is there any sort of like idea of how kind of having a diverse team has actually made a difference in a project, in a client relationship, in the ability to, land a job? Anything that comes to mind?
Yeah, it's a little tricky because I can't run like a parallel experiment and say like, okay, let's try to solve this problem with a non-diverse team, and then at the same time
Right.
try to solve it with a diverse team and see which one comes up with the better outcome. But I can say that particularly, as my roles have become more strategic and more global, the problems that come to you just become more and more complex, right? And so my own personal experience is not going to be sufficient sometimes to come up with the best solution. And I think that's where diversity can really, really, really help. And so, people are going to come into a role like the person on my team now, she's had a focus on environmental, social, and governance, or ESG issues that I'm less focused on historically, at least, although I did have a little bit of that at S&P as well. So I think, as the problems get more global, more complex, diversity just becomes more and more important. So I'm struggling a bit to come up with a very specific example, but
right.
I can say with full confidence that diverse teams lead to better outcomes.
Right. Well, and I mean, I would think that as you have people that are coming from very different cultures in terms of how they even approach a problem, I know I've got an engineering background. My master's in industrial engineering. The way that I approach understanding sort of the parameters of the problem, the questioning of the edges, like where is the boundary between, where we can actually make change and where that change would be disruptive to the industry was, unique to folks that were coming in saying, okay, I truly understand finance. I truly understand the business side of it. So therefore, we're going to start with how do we assure that we're actually going to, have a good return on investment for the solution that we come up with. And so, I can imagine, that it is hard. We don't run a one-to-one. We don't have this idea of, being able to see what the solution would be with, without a diverse team. But just that idea of you grew up in a culture, you grew up in a way of thinking, or you were educated in a way of thinking, or you've had experiences in a way of thinking that help everyone kind of come to the problem and pursue that problem differently. And then they can really challenge each other in what that outcome looks like.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have a very type A analytical thinking type of way of solving problems. So bringing in someone that comes at it from just a different way of thinking is just so extremely helpful. And so right. I think, when you're structuring then team calls, you're thinking about a big project, writing a new paper, for example, or working on a particular thing for a client, maybe building a new presentation, for example, bringing all these different perspectives in the beginning is really important because you just never know where that good idea is going to come from.
Absolutely. Take us through a little bit of where your teams are going now. You brought in your perspective of, building diverse teams. Where does it go from here? Like what else would you like to see in terms of maybe not just Invesco, but other companies looking to tackle when they think about diversity within their companies?
Yeah, I think that there is a lot of opportunity for some of these different organizations to work together and build these partnerships to really amplify their voices, right? So I mentioned Greenwood Project as an example. Another great organization is called Rock the Street Wall Street, which is really trying to get women involved, sort of high school girls interested specifically in math, and then again, showing them careers in our industry, bringing them to like lunch and learns at different companies. And so Invesco's partnered with Rock the Street Wall Street in different offices, like Atlanta, I think, and maybe Houston. So we're thinking about, is it possible to expand that to other cities, right? And so I think solving the big problem or the big challenge of lack of diversity really requires you focusing on early, right? Like sort of the high school, maybe even the middle school level. But then specifically with what I can do, I suppose it's continuing on this path of not just focus on what I can do with my own immediate team, but then how can I amplify what I'm doing with other parts of the organization and explain why I think this all is a good idea.
We started this conversation talking a little bit about your girls and, assuring that you're kind of coming into this with, I want to build a world that is more fair. There's more opportunity. There's more, ideas being shared with everyone who wants a seat at the table and all deserve one. Tell me a little bit about personally how you are sort of finding diversity and finding opportunities for your family to explore the world that you get to manage teams within. How does that reflect down to how you parent and how you expose it to your family?
My girls are 7 and 10, so a little bit early to get involved with some things, although we've definitely gotten them involved with different types of local community projects because my girls are very fortunate to grow up the way that they have, with really wanting or need, every want that they could possibly have is sort of given to them. And so I think it's really important to show them the rest of the world and how most people live and the struggles that people go through. So we've done things like, packing boxes of food to deliver to different parts of the world. They're a little bit young to do mission trips at our church and things of that nature, although that's something that I'm really looking forward to exposing them to as they grow a bit older. And then with my family, I've been very blessed to work with my parents and my aunt and uncle to raise money and help build a school down in Guatemala. And so that's been just an incredible experience to be part of. We were just down there a couple months ago, dedicating the school in honor of my cousin who passed away in a car accident when she was only 18, a long time ago now, but been very fortunate and blessed in my life to have the resources and the family and the network to be able to really make an impact in the world. And so now having this school down in Guatemala to have a connection to and thinking through, how can I introduce my girls down there at some point? How can I get my local church involved and things like that is pretty special.
It is. I think about this podcast, and when I first started interviewing folks, I really sort of recruited my friends, right? So it was the folks that were on the Women in ETFs board, folks that I had, done business with over the 20 years or so that I've been working, and it was fun because I got to kind of dig deeper. I got to ask questions, but we were able to talk a little bit before we started the episode. And I'm just always so amazed at, being able to have conversations where you find such connections with people. So Garrett, I so appreciate you and my opportunity to be a host so that we got an opportunity to connect and know each other. Because Guatemala is, a place, and I shared this with you, but really close to our hearts too. My family started supporting missionaries that were our really good friends in Maine. They moved to Guatemala for many years, started a bunch of schools and really worked with raising leaders in Guatemalans that would, continue on to sort of progress and share success with other Guatemalans. And we had a chance to go down and work in a school. We did not start it. We simply survived a bit of time working with some kids that were, excited to have us there, came from really challenging backgrounds, living in and around, the major dump that divides Guatemala City. But also the joy that they approached kind of coming to school and playing soccer and being in our funky little skits and us knowing not enough Spanish to really thrive. But we were able to do that with our kids repeatedly. And it made a huge difference in their lives, their ability to have empathy globally, their ability to kind of look at the news and what's going on now and really recognize sort of the markers of poverty and the challenges that comes along with sort of the logistics of, getting supplies and aid to areas. Like it's really been a tremendous thing. And for us, it sort of started in Guatemala. So I love that your family has really made such an impact. I mean, an entire school in, in a town outside of Guatemala City that was just impoverished for education, right?
Yeah.
But, kids everywhere sort of deserve and want to learn. So really wonderful to hear about.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, just to provide a little bit more information on that, I guess. So the school is called La Promesa. It's in an area called Chimal, which is west of Guatemala City. And as you said, just a very impoverished area. Without this school has actually been there for about 15 years, but the children were learning in cinder block rooms with tin roofs. So you could just imagine how incredibly hot that was. No technology, etc. So we raised money to build new classrooms on this same piece of property and really wall the entire complex in for security purposes. And then we got to go down there, dedicate the school, meet the teachers, meet the students. We actually had an opportunity also to visit the homes of a couple of the families that go to school there. And many times the father's no longer part of the children's lives whatsoever. You have a single mom trying to raise some children in just areas that have no running water, right? Maybe in one case, the mother of the family didn't even have like a stove, not even like a sort of like a gas or propane grill of some sort. Literally was lighting a fire under a grate to cook for her family, right? So the school is also providing nutrition for her. She taught there, and so for her and her children. But just very eye-opening to see the conditions, but also to your point, the incredible joy that these children had. They put on these skits for us and taught us about the culture of Guatemala. It was just such a beautiful experience. And now I really want to find ways to keep going down there, to introduce my girls to all of that at some point when the time is right. And yeah, just very heartwarming but also a bit overwhelming at times how much need there is out in the world.
Well, and what I'd love to do is put a link in the show notes for the nonprofit that you created or partnered with to do some of this. So, we'll get that in. And if anyone's listening and is like, actually, I'd really like to be part of this, it really is a tremendous opportunity to know that you could be part of changing lives and so being able to get those updates. And then if you have opportunities to travel down to those areas and be able to see what a secure school does for raising up all the children, but specifically young girls that are often needed at home, now have an opportunity to go and actually learn and be with their male friends.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And there was this, one of the families that we met was a single mom raising 3 girls. And she told the story of, again, the school has been there for a while. We're really upgrading the facility in a very, very significant major way, right? So, but the mom told the story, I think her older daughter was 12 or 13 years old. And they were going through some very difficult times with an abusive dad and you sort of all this just horrible situation. And her older daughter kept sort of running away from home and terrifying her mom. And she couldn't figure out where she kept going. Where she was going was to the church and the school, that this place called La Promesa. And she just for some reason, felt a calling to go there, to the extent of like, no, you can't go there anymore. It's unsafe. It's too far away. But she would still sort of, when she had the chance, sneak away and go there, and eventually drew her mother to this place. Right. And now her mother teaches there, and now her daughters all go to school there, and it's really changing their lives. So just an incredible story, like whatever caused her to be drawn in that way. Incredible to see how it could impact families.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I'm excited to hear over the years as you introduce your daughters, to the passion that you have for cultures and diversity and all of that. I'll share a little bit with you because my kids are like a decade older, and my oldest, incredible young woman now, but sort of a challenge for us. And so I was always trying to come up with very creative ways disciplining her that wasn't just sort of the usual stuff that you do. And so I remember one time it was, you must sit down and write a letter to somebody. I don't care who it is. I don't care if it's, your favorite pop star or your grandmother, but you need to write a letter. And then she did, under a lot of duress. Like, nobody writes letters anymore. This is ridiculous. Everyone's email, blah, blah, blah. I don't care. You're going to write a letter. You're going to learn how to stamp it. You're going to learn how to, how the mail works, all that. And then sort of a repeat infraction. So she has to write another letter like a week later. Then I'm like, this is good for you. It's good for you. It's good for you to like figure out who it is that you want to write. 52 letters a year. Let's just go. And oh my goodness. So over the years, it became the thing that sort of our family did was, you're just going to write a letter to somebody. And, after visiting Guatemala, after doing these things, she would collect addresses because she had to come up with who is she going to write to every week, right?
Yeah.
And then she goes off to college and she, goes to a church in Nashville, and she becomes the person who writes to all the shut-ins that can't make it to church anymore. She's the letter writer. She joins a sorority and like, she's the letter writer to like all the new recruits that come in. And so it's funny that it's become like part of who she is the idea of connecting, which is now globally, to so many people, from what I was doing, which was just like, how do I get through to this child? and now I know, like, she's just an amazing, one of my best friends now. She's just an amazing young woman. But so I always, when I talk to young parents, I'm like, if you ever have an opportunity, get them starting writing, old-fashioned letters, because people love to receive them. And I think about all the letters she's received back and all the different voices that have been able to speak into her life and have encouraged her and all of that.
Yeah, and I think it's pretty amazing sometimes when you put a little bit of good out into the world, how that can have like a positive ripple effect.
Right.
And so I'm hoping that will eventually happen with this experience in Guatemala. Absolutely. Or with other experiences that I've had with women in ETFs.
Absolutely. Well, speaking on that, and because I already have a clue as to how you might answer this question, any book that you have read or recently read that you would like to recommend to our listening audience?
Yeah, this is one that I read a little bit ago, but when someone asks me for a book recommendation, I like to bring it up. It's a book called Factfulness by a guy named Hans Rosling. And I think obviously we can acknowledge that there's so many challenges in the world right now, poverty and war and everything else. But the premise of this book is that if you look at the long term, right, there's been incredible advances in things like education, in health, in women's rights. And so this book really looks at long-term trends, right? So someone that was really, really impoverished, say like 200 years ago, what does that look like relative to someone that's very impoverished today? Still very sad, but that's a big difference as far as like what that person likely has and the quality of that person's life. And so for me, it's helpful to remember some of these very positive long-term trends, despite all the challenges that we're well aware of. And I think Barack Obama at one point said something like, if I had the ability to choose any time where my girls could live, I would choose right now, because they have the most opportunity that they ever would have had, right? If they would have been born a couple hundred years ago in wherever, anywhere in the world, right? They would have never had the same types of opportunities that they have now. And so I feel the same way about my girls. And I think it's just helpful to keep that big picture in perspective sometimes.
Excellent word, hopeful, I think. And that's really what we need right now, because it all can seem like a lot of hopelessness when we look at, everything going on globally and everything people are challenged with. So I love that factfulness. We'll put a link to that in the show notes as well. Garrett, thank you so much for coming on the show. Thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for really giving some heart and some message behind diversity and why we should continue to pursue it and continue to understand who we work with and how we work together. So thank you so much.
And thank you, our listeners, for spending your time with us. I hope this is not just information, but you let it be transformational in how you think about your career. I'm rooting for you. If you're an Apple user, I'd really appreciate it if you took a few seconds to leave a rating and a review. Your ratings and reviews tell Apple that this is a podcast worth listening to. And in turn, your reviews will help We Talk Careers get in front of more listeners looking to succeed, just like you. And while you're there, go ahead and hit that follow button, because there's going to be another brand new episode and you don't want to miss it. Until then, keep thriving. Thank you for listening.